Today my topic is dengue fever. So what do you mean by dengue fever? A brief introduction for dengue fever is it's a viral, in one sentence we can call it as a viral hemorrhagic fever characterized by biphasic fever, myalgias, arthralgias, rash, lymphadenopathies, and severe bone pains. Okay, and it is caused by an arthropod-borne virus called dengue virus, and the vector being Aedes aegypti. So, definition: it's an acute illness caused by several arthropod-borne viruses, and it is characterized by, as I told you earlier, biphasic fever, myalgia, arthralgia, rash, leukopenia, lymphadenopathy. Severe dengue is a form of dengue. It is characterized by abnormalities in hemostasis in the form of bleeding manifestations and shock, or plasma leakage from capillaries leading to dengue shock syndrome. A severe form of dengue is called dengue shock syndrome, and normal dengue fever, usual presentation when we should suspect means if a child comes to you with characters of biphasic fever, rash, myalgia, arthralgias, bone pains, and lymphadenopathy, we should suspect dengue. So as I told you, it's characterized with fever, rash, muscle and joint pains, headache. So a brief description about the virus herpes vector. It's an arthrovirus composed of single-stranded RNA. It has 4 serotypes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it is transmitted by mosquito Aedes aegypti. Common breeding places for Aedes mosquitoes are, you can see it in the slide, like flower pots, heart and soil of potted plants, gutters, everything. Transmission: it is transmitted through vector bite of Aedes aegypti. Human is the reservoir host, or by travel to a dengue endemic area, or by transmission, or least mother to baby. Various ways of transmission are these are the various ways of transmission. So pathogenesis. In simple form, let me tell you. Once, suppose there are 4 serotypes which I have told you, 1, 2, 3, 4 strains. Suppose first time, if a person is affected for the first time, it is called as primary infection, and if it is second time by another virus, it is called secondary infection. Another strain of the same virus. Okay, suppose once a person is affected with dengue DN1 strain, antibodies will be formed against that virus, and suppose during the second time, if he is affected with other strain like 2 or 3 or 4, the antibodies whatever have been formed during the primary infection for other time, DN1, which I told you, they act as an enhancing factors, like they increase the virulence of this virus. So that is called as antibody dependent enhancement. Instead of protecting us, these antibodies will help the virus to affect us in a more severe form. So it is called as antibody dependent enhancement, which is the main pathogenesis behind this dengue virus being more severe during the secondary infections. Because the antibodies which were formed during the first infection, they act as an enhancing factors for the second time affected virus. Circulation of infection enhancing antibodies at the time of infection is the strongest factor for developing of severe disease. That means, suppose if a person is severe, if a person presents before you in a severe form, that means he has been previously affected by one strain, and now he has been affected by the other strain. So the antibodies which are formed in the previous infection, they act as enhancing factors for these viruses. So there will once these antibodies they enhance the effect of the virus, that will lead to a rapid activation of the complement system, leading to increase in the production of inflammatory mediators, which will cause capillary damage. So that capillary damage will result in leakage of the plasma. That will lead to hemoconcentration, hypovolemia. There may be increased cardiac work to maintain normal oxygenation. There will be tissue hypoxia, metabolic acidosis, and hyponatremia. So dengue clinical syndrome classification will be like there will be two parts as asymptomatic or symptomatic. While coming to symptomatic, it is again classified as the undifferentiated fever, dengue fever with or without warning signs, and severe dengue. So let me again repeat it. Dengue virus, it will be in the form of asymptomatic or symptomatic. Symptomatic will present as undifferentiated fever, dengue fever with or without warning signs, and severe dengue. Severe dengue, there will be severe plasma leakage leading to shock, severe bleeding that also may lead to shock with bleeding manifestation, and organs, severely impaired organs leading to multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. So what do you mean by undifferentiated fever? As I told you, in symptomatic, first form is undifferentiated. Undifferentiated fever is the most common manifestation of dengue will be undifferentiated fever. Usually, they are mildly asymptomatic, or they may not be asymptomatic. They may not be symptomatic sometimes. Infants and young children may usually present with undifferentiated febrile illness. That means it may present only as a mild fever without any warning signs. So next comes the dengue fever. If you can see on the left side of the screen, there will be this classification will be dengue fever with warning signs and without warning signs. So what do you mean by warning signs and what do you mean by without warning signs? Here in this slide, if you see on your left side, when we should call as dengue without warning signs. First, let us classify as what do you mean by dengue. It may be a probable dengue, like whenever there is history of travel to dengue endemic area, or there is any fever with two of the following criteria. This is called dengue fever without warning signs. Fever and two of the following criteria like nausea, vomiting, rash, aches and pains, tourniquet test positive, and leukopenia. So fever with two of these criteria will be called as dengue fever. And if it take dengue fever, simply we can call dengue fever without warning signs. So what are the warning signs? There will be abdominal pain or tenderness, persistent vomiting, clinical fluid examination in the form of pulmonary effusions or ascites, mucosal bleeds like epistaxis, and lethargy, restlessness, liver enlargement may be more than 2 to 2 centimeter, or there may be liver tenderness as well. And while going to laboratory investigations, there will be increase in the HCT, hematocrit, concurrent with rapid decrease in the platelet count. So, undifferentiated fever is the most common form of fever. Just it may present only with fever. And dengue fever without warning signs means fever plus either nausea, vomiting, rash, body pain, tourniquet positive maybe, or leukopenia. And if it is associated with, if the dengue fever is associated with warning signs like abdominal pain, persistent vomiting, whatever I have told you, that is called dengue with warning signs. The final will be, so as per classification, undifferentiated, dengue with warning signs and without severe dengue. Severe dengue means it may present as severe plasma leakage, severe hemorrhage, or severe organ impairment. So if a patient with dengue fever, he presents with features of severe plasma leakage, or severe hemorrhage, or severe organ impairment, it is called as severe or critical dengue. Or in one way, we can call it as dengue hemorrhagic fever or dengue shock syndrome. So what do you mean by dengue hemorrhagic fever? As I told you, fever or recent history of acute fever with hemorrhagic manifestations. This is called dengue hemorrhagic manifestations. Platelet count less than 1 lakh. And evidence of capillary leakage. Capillary leakage evidence means how we can suspect there is capillary leakage means there will be elevated hematocrit like 20% or more over the baseline. There will be low albumin. There will be pleural or other effusions like ascites, everything. So evidence of capillary leakage will present if suppose a patient comes to you with fever and hemorrhagic manifestations, and if his investigation shows you that there is thrombocytopenia, raised HCT more than 20% of the normal for his age or for his, as per his hemoglobin, when there is low albumin levels and there is effusions, then we should suspect it as there is a plasma leakage. What will be the hemorrhagic manifestations? I have told you the hemorrhagic manifestations. Second point, what may be the hemorrhagic manifestations? Like petty skin hemorrhages like petechiae, purpura, ecchymosis, gingival bleeding, nasal bleeds, gastrointestinal bleeding like hematemesis, melena, and hematocytia, hematuria, increase in menstrual flow. These are the hemorrhagic manifestations. What do you mean by dengue hemorrhagic syndrome? It is characterized by shock and hemoconcentration, and it is usually contributed by secondary infections, which I have already told you. Secondary infection is dengue type 2 followed by type 1 infection in the past. That means, suppose if a patient is affected with the type 1 infection in the previous, if he had affected with type 1 infection previously, again if he is affected with the type 2 virus, that will definitely lead to a severe form of dengue that is called as dengue hemorrhagic syndrome. Just to repeat, I'll repeat for you one more time. Dengue virus infection, it may be asymptomatic or asymptomatic. Symptomatic will be undifferentiated fever, dengue fever without warning signs, and severe dengue. Undifferentiated, only it will present a mild fever and child will be active. Okay, that there may be history of travel to endemic area. So dengue with warning signs like fever plus 2 of the, without warning signs will be fever plus 2 of the following criteria like nausea, vomiting, rash, aches, tonsillitis, leukopenia. And if dengue with warning signs means you will have the warning signs like abdominal pain, tenderness, persistent vomitings, clinical fluid accumulation, mucosal bleeds, lethargy, liver enlargement, all these things. And severe dengue, it will be called as dengue hemorrhagic fever or dengue shock syndrome. Dengue hemorrhagic fever, it will present as fever with hemorrhagic manifestations with thrombocytopenia and evidence of plasma leakage in the form of raised hematocrit, low albumin. So whenever you find raised HCP, low albumin and effusions, so you can easily tell that it's dengue hemorrhagic, it's a severe dengue with plasma leakage. The hemorrhagic manifestations will be skin hemorrhages like petechiae, purpura, gingival bleeding, nasal bleeds, gastrointestinal bleeds like hematemesis, melena, hematocytia, hematuria, increased blood flow, increased menstrual flow. So dengue shock syndrome will be shock plus hemoconcentration. Hemoconcentration is nothing but increase in the HCT, more than 20% of the baseline. So I think you all know how to calculate HCT. Basing on hemoglobin, if your hemoglobin is 9, your HCT should be around 3 into hemoglobin, 3 times of hemoglobin, like 27. So if the person comes to you with dengue fever, person comes to you with hemoglobin of 9, usually for a common normal person, his HCT should be around 27. But if there is any plasma leakage that happens in that patient, the HCT will be more 20% more than the value of 27. So severe plasma leakage will lead to shock, bleeding. As I told you, it may also lead to shock. Severe organ involvement may present as impaired consciousness. It may present as hypotension, bradycardia, raised AST or ALT levels in the liver, increase in the creatinine, decrease in the urine output. All this will lead to severe, we can call it as multi-organ dysfunction syndrome or severe organ involvement. So how dengue starts and how it manifests. Usually the incubation period will be around 4 to 7 days. I think you all know what is incubation period. It is the time between the entry and the presentation of the first symptom. Okay. So incubation period will be 4 to 7 days. And fever may start, as I told you, it may be a biphasic fever. It will be a biphasic fever. If you take history correctly, you will definitely get it that it is usually a biphasic fever. They present as malaise, headache, severe backache, joint pains, muscular pain, retroorbital pain. That is called pain in the eyeball, retroorbital pain. Mostly you will not see that pain, but it will be one of the clue for you. Temperature may persist for 3 to 5 days. On some occasion, it may rise again after 5 days, which is nothing but we call it as saddle back fever. Myalgia may be severe with deep bone pains. That is why we call it as breakbone fever, which is the characteristic feature of the disease. Majority of occasions, it's a self-limiting disorder, and death is a rare event. So incubation period will be around 4 to 7 days. It will be a biphasic fever with myalgias, arthralgias, rash, severe backache, and retroorbital pain. There will be a it's also called a breakbone fever because of deep bone pains. So course of illness. Simple way I'll tell you. So we have to, if you have to explain it to the patient, I can explain it this way. We can divide dengue course into 3 parts. It's a febrile phase which lasts from 1 to 5 days. Critical phase, it lasts from 5 to 7 days. If you take 10 days, for first 5 days will be a febrile phase. 5 to 7 days will be, 5th to 7th day will be critical phase, and 7th to 10th day will be recovery phase. So you can explain them clearly that your fever will be, your course will be of 10 days usually. First 5 days, whatever you do, fever will be there, no need to worry. But you can make sure that your platelet counts will not be less than 1 lakh. So fever is there, patient is protected. Patient will be stable. Once the fever comes down, that happens around 4th day, the next 48 hours will be critical, where you can see severe bleeding manifestations, platelet count may come down. So you should be alert from 5th to 7th day in dengue fever. I think you are following me. Critical phase is the period from 5th day to 7th day out of the 10 days course of illness. During the 5th day to 7th day, you will have severe thrombocytopenia. There may be bleeding manifestation. He may go into shock. Sometimes there may be like effusions also. And there will be hemoconcentration. So hemoconcentration means there will be increase in viscosity. So there may be hypoxia also. So whenever a patient comes to you, you have to explain him that the first 4 to 5 days, no need to worry. There may be fever, but fever will come down obviously by 5th day. But from 5th day to 7th day, it will be critical phase. So only after 7 days of illness, we can assure them that he will be safe, provided at the time he should be hemodynamically stable. During recovery phase will start from usually 7th to 10th day, where he may manifest. By history, he may tell you that he is fine, headache has come down, his appetite has increased, he is feeling comfortable with no myalgias, like that. So first we will go to febrile phase. Febrile phase, there will be a sudden onset of high fever which may last from 2 to 7 days, usually 5th day. Up to 5th day, there will be fever. Theoretically, they may say 7 days, but clinically, you will not find fever for more than 5 days. There will be facial flushing, myalgias, arthralgias, skin erythema, whatever I told you, the characteristic features of dengue will all will be there in the febrile phase. There may be headache, vomiting, anorexia, conjunctival or pharyngeal injections. There may be positive tourniquet test. Minor hemorrhagic manifestation may be present. Tender hepatomegaly will be there, leukopenia. So tender hepatomegaly is one of the characteristic features. Whenever a patient, usually in our OPs, they present with fever, abdominal pain, and if you touch the right hypochondrial, right hypochondrium, you will find severe tenderness. There will be hepatomegaly and with tender liver. So tender hepatomegaly is one of the important clue for us. And there will be leukopenia while going to investigation. There may be leukopenia and platelet count may be around 1 to 1.5 lakhs. And if you go to CAR test, antigen there will be NS1 antigen positive. Critical phase that lasts for 48 hours, where the defervescence sets in. Child may develop bleeding, shock with falling platelet count, and raised hematocrit. Here, I would like to add one point. Once the critical phase starts, the platelets will come down drastically. Sometimes, in few people, they go up to 20,000. But even if the platelet counts are 20,000, and if the child is stable hemodynamically in the sense, his CRT is normal, his capillary refill time is normal, his BP is normal, his pulse pressure is normal, child is active without any vomitings, then you can wait, you can assure them up to 20,000 also that no need of platelet transfusion. Even if the if the platelet count is around 80,000 and if he develops any bleeding manifestations, which I have told you earlier, or there may be hypotension or there are vomitings, then you have to definitely go for platelet transfusion. So you tell them that you have to tell them clearly that because there are no bleeding manifestations, there is no hemodynamic instability, child is active, child is taking pills properly, so no need of going for platelet transfusion, even the platelet count is 20,000. But if he is fine by hemodynamically or there is no bleeding manifestations, if the platelet count come down to 10, you have to give platelet transfusion. But if up to 20,000, you can wait. But if it is 10,000 and if he is stable, active, you have to go for transfusion. Okay, in some hospitals they wait up to 5,000 also, but it's better you go for 10. If it is 10,000, no need of checking for BP or is bleeding manifestation. We can directly go for transfusion. If it is 20,000 and if it is stable, no need of transfusion. If it is 80,000 and if it is and if there is any bleeding manifestations or hemodynamic instability, even at 1 lakh also you have to go for transfusion. I think you are following me. Some may develop organ dysfunction such as hepatitis, encephalitis, and myocarditis. Some children may have only biochemical changes and no remarkable fatal disease. Sorry. So recovery phase, this phase follows 48 hours of the critical phase. There is gradual resorption of extravascular compartment fluid that takes place over 48 to 72 hours. Because as I told you, the most important presentation is main problem in dengue is plasma leakage from intravascular to extravascular. So once the critical phase is over, all the fluid that is in the extravascular compartment will again go back to the intravascular compartment. So that is why we should be judicious enough while giving IV fluids. Suppose if there is any fluid overload or if you give fluids boluses more than the required, whatever the fluid that is going to the leaking into the extravascular compartment will again come to intravascular compartment and there may be a fluid overload. Okay, that may present as ascites, pleural effusions, facial puffiness. Okay, characterized. So recovery phase is characterized by improvement of general well-being abate, gastrointestinal symptoms may abate, they come down, hemodynamically status stabilizes, diuresis essentials, respiratory distress due to pulmonary edema because of aggressive treatment in critical phase will come down. There may be a typical rash which we call it as islets of white in the sea of red. There may be pruritus, bradycardia, WBC count may increase, platelet count increase, but platelet count may take more time to recover. If a child comes to me at 8th day of fever, and if he has rash and if he has severe, or if a child is in my ward and if he comes with complaints of rash with severe pruritus, I will definitely assure him that he is in the recovery phase and he is going to recover fastly and no need of aggressive treatment. If there is no vomiting and he is accepting feeds, allow only feeds. So the course of illness, if you can see the chart properly, the top column will be like number of days, where the first 5 days, the first 3 to 4 days, up to 4 days or 5 days, it will be febrile phase where you can see the temperature rise, which come down by 4th to 5th day. So usual clinical issues will be there may be dehydration, there may be shock or bleeding during the critical phase. And while coming to laboratory changes, hematocrit may rise, hematocrit may decrease during the critical phase. Hematocrit may increase during the critical phase and it will come to normal during the recovery phase. Platelet count will decrease drastically during the critical phase and improve during the recovery phase. And coming to the viremia, I'll explain you during the lab investigations. So febrile phase, there will be dehydration, high fever. They may cause neurological disturbances because of high fever. Sometimes there may be febrile seizure. Critical phase, there may be shock. These are the complications during different phases which we have to deal with. During the febrile phase, the most common complication may be dehydration or high fever that may lead to neurological disturbances or sometimes febrile seizures. And during critical phase, the complications may be shock from plasma leakage. There may be severe hemorrhage that may lead to shock, or there may be organ impairment. And during recovery phase, there is also a chance of complications like hypervolemia. If you overly treat during the critical phase, worsening effusions may be there. There may be acute pulmonary edema. So diagnosis, tourniquet test is one of the best one. So how to do tourniquet test? Take the patient's blood pressure and record it. For example, it may be 100 by 70. Inflate the cuff to a point midway between SBP and DBP. Suppose 100 by 70, you can keep it around some 80 or 85 or something like that. And maintain there for 5 minutes. Reduce the deflate the cuff and wait for 2 minutes. The count the petechiae below the antecubital fossa. The picture you can see. A positive test can be called as positive. There are more than 10 petechiae per 1 square inch. So lab test, usual lab test will be antigen test and ELISA with IgG, IgM antibodies. There may be, we may ask for blood culture to isolate the viruses. Full blood count where there may be raised density, thrombocytopenia, and leukocytopenia during the febrile phase with lymphocytosis. Liver function test, increase in the liver enzymes that may happen during the febrile phase or during the shock period. Chest X-ray, it may show effusions. Ultrasound abdomen may show ascites, gallbladder wall edema. Gallbladder wall edema is one of the strongest clue in the ultrasound for us. Other biochemical abnormalities, there may be hyponatremia, acidosis, raised blood urea and nitrogen, and serum creatinine also may be raised. So confirmatory lab test, confirmation of diagnosis dengue may be by 2 methods: direct method by virus isolation or NS1 antigen detection or PCR. Indirect method by IgM and IgG detection methods. So NS1 antigen usually gets secreted during the initial phase of illness, usually on second day. Suppose if there is an history of fever of 1 day, and if you go for test, dengue card test may be negative because NS1 will start reappearing on the second day. So if a patient comes to you with fever of 1 day onset, you can wait for 1 more day, and you can ask for card test because NS1 will start appearing from the second day, and it disappears as the antibodies appear. Antibodies usually they appear around 5 to 10 days. And specificity is 100% and sensitivity in the first 4 days of fever is 90%. For primary dengue and 70% for the secondary dengue. IgM antibody following the primary infection, most patients have detectable antibodies by 5 to 10 days and may peak by 14 days. So between 5 to 14 days, we will have IgM antibodies, and they may stay in the body they may be present in the body up to 3 months. After 3 months, they get undetected or they diminish. IgG antibodies, they get detected around 7 to 9 days. Peak levels may reach by 15 to 21 days and they may persist life. Therefore, diagnosis of So let us take. Usually, as I told you, NS1 usually appears on second day and may remain up to fifth day. And IgM may start from fourth or fifth day and may remain up to 3 months. IgG will start from 7th to 9th day and may remain for life. So, suppose a patient presents with you on third day of fever, what you will expect in the card means only NS1, because NS1 will appear on second day, IgM will appear on fourth or fifth day. Suppose if a patient presents with only NS1, then you can say that he is between first to fourth day of illness or fifth day of illness. Suppose there is NS1 positive and IgM positive, then we can say that he is around fourth or fifth day and it is a primary infection. Why it is primary? Because if it is a secondary infection, there will be IgG positive for the previous infection, there will be IgG positive. So, if there is only NS1 and IgM is positive, it is a primary infection of less than 6 days or 5 days duration. Suppose there is NS negative and IgM positive, IgG negative, that means it is from 5th day to 9th day. Okay. Suppose there is NS1 positive, IgM positive, IgG positive, then it is, as I told you, this IgG may be from previous infection. So, already IgM is positive on the first day means it is a previously this person has been affected. So, it is called secondary, it may be a secondary infection of more than 6 days duration. Why? Because even if it is a secondary infection, IgM will appear after 5th day. So, if there is NS1 positive, IgM positive and IgG positive, then it is a secondary infection and primary of more than 6 days. If NS1 is negative, IgM is positive, IgG is positive, then it may be a secondary infection or primary infection of more than 9 days duration. If NS1 is positive, IgM is negative, IgG is positive, then it is a secondary infection, or it may be a primary infection of less than 6 days duration. NS negative, IgM negative, IgG positive, it is a previous infection. So again, I want to repeat it for you. NS1 will start appear on second day and it will stay up to 5th day, sometimes 6th day. IgM will start on 5th day, it will stay up to 3 months. IgG will start appearing on 7th and 9th day and it will stay for life. So coming to stepwise approach of dengue. First, before going to the management, we'll just have a brief discussion on the clinical criteria to call it as dengue, either it is dengue fever or dengue hemorrhagic fever or dengue shock syndrome. So, clinical criteria for dengue fever, just to call it as dengue fever, we should have an XT of acute febrile illness of 2 to 7 days duration with 2 or more of the following manifestations like headache. So, if there is fever of 2 to 7 days with 2 or more of the following manifestations like headache, retroorbital pain, myalgias, arthralgias, rash, mild hemorrhagic manifestation, that is called as dengue fever. What do you mean by dengue hemorrhagic fever? So, clinical criteria of dengue fever, I told you, fever of 2 to 7 days duration with the headaches, myalgias, arthralgias, plus the hemorrhagic manifestations like positive tourniquet test, petechiae or ecchymosis or porphyria, bleeding from mucosa or gastrointestinal tract, plus thrombocytopenia, plus evidence of plasma leakage, which may present as raising the hematocrit or signs of plasma leakage of pleural effusion, ascites, and hyponatremia. If all these are there, we can call it as dengue hemorrhagic fever. Or in simple way, fever with headache, vomitings, with bleeding manifestations, with thrombocytopenia, with evidence of plasma leakage, that is called as dengue hemorrhagic fever. Dengue shock syndrome means all the above features of dengue hemorrhagic fever with shock features or circulatory or features of circulatory failure like rapid and weak pulse, narrow pulse pressure, and hypertension. So, we are present if a patient, a dengue fever patient has a rapid and weak pulse, narrow pulse pressure, hypotension, and is having cold and clammy feet and is restless, then you are dealing with dengue shock syndrome. So how to assess? So there will be 4 steps. First is history taking. So history taking, I've told you, take the history of fever, history of associated features, history of bleeding manifestation. Clinical examination, we should assess. In general, we should assess for his mental status, hemodynamic status, and on clinical examination, we can find tender hepatomegaly, bleeding manifestations as well. So history taking, date of onset of fever, symptoms and severity, and there should be 3 golden questions like how much fluid intake, how much urine output, or what activities could the patient do during the limit. If the child is active, quantity of intake is fine, and urine output is fine, then he is safe. And we should also ask for any other fluid like cirrhosis, like diarrhea or vomiting. We should have history of warning signs, or there is any history of travel, any history of risk factors like pregnancies, less than 1 year age, or sickle cell anemia, and if there is any history of risk, whatever risk factors I told you, infancy, pregnancy, obesity, diabetes mellitus, hypertension, etc. So second step is assessment is clinical general examination. In general examination, we have to assess mental state, whether he is conscious, coherent, oriented or not, whether he is restless, whether there is any altered sensorium, and about his hydration state, whether he is normal or is dehydrated, hemodynamic state, whether is hypotensive, whether his pulse are weak or normal pulse, whether is how about his urine output, we should all assess for this general assessment. Then clinical examination of warning signs will be bleeding manifestation will be there, abdominal tenderness, liver enlargement and tender liver, the fluid accumulation, like pleural effusion and ascites. Other important signs to look after is rash, tachypnea or acidotic breathing, which indicates shock, tourniquet test, repeat if it is negative. So, what do you mean by stable circulation? In a patient with dengue, if we present with the DSS or dengue shock syndrome, first we should know what do you mean by stable circulation. So, there are 5 parameters on your left. You can see we have to assess for parameters will be conscious levels. If the circulation is stable, it is clear, normal brain perfusion is there. So the capillary refill time is normal, that is less than 2 seconds, with warm and pink extremities and with normal pulse volume. His perfusion pressure is normal. That means that his perfusion pressure is normal. So we should all look for whether his conscious levels, his capillary refill time, his extremities for color and temperature, his peripheral pulse volumes, his heart rate, his pulse pressure, his blood pressure, his respiratory rate, his urine output. So all these parameters you should check during your rounds. If he is conscious, his brain is functioning normal. If his capillary refill time is less than 2 seconds with warm and pink extremities and normal pulse volume, his perfusion is normal. And if his heart rate is normal, pulse pressure is normal, BP is normal, his heart is working fine, and his respiratory is normal, no lung is affected or no respiratory compensation has been required, and if his urine output is normal, his kidney is functioning properly. So you should check for lung function, kidney function, cardiac function, brain perfusion, and circulatory system. So suppose the conscious level, if you come to normal consciousness, in a compensated shape, if you can see conscious levels, sometimes there may be during compensated shock, it may be normal, conscious, coherent, and oriented. But while coming to his capillary refill time, it may be prolonged, more than 2 seconds, with cool peripheries and weak and thready pulse. His heart rate may be increased. Maybe more for his age. His pulse pressure may be normal systolic pressure, may be narrow, and his blood pressure may be normal. Maybe there may be hypotension, but it should be correctable. His respiratory rate, there may be quite tachypnea. Urine output, slightly reduced. So even if he is conscious, but his CRT is elevated with cool peripheries and weakened ventricles, with disproportionate tachycardia, with decreased pulse pressure, or with hypotension, with quiet tachypnea, and with reduced urine output, we can call it as compensated shock. What do you mean by hypotensive shock or uncompensated shock? Where the child may be restless or they may be altered sensory. Capillary refill time may be more than maybe very prolonged. Cold, clammy feet may be there. Pulses may be feeble. The heart rate may be there may be severe tachycardia or during late stage there may be bradycardia. Unrecordable BP, narrow pulse pressure, Kussmaul breathing or exotic breathing, and oliguria or anuria is there, then we call it as hypotensive shock. So, how coming to management, assessment, as I've told you, we should presume that we are dealing in. How to presume that we are dealing in dengue fever? If there is history of travel to endemic area with fever and two of the following signs which I've already told you, like nausea, vomiting, rash, body aches, warning signs, tourniquet test positive, leukopenia, then you are dealing with a dengue fever. So what are the warning signs which I have already told you? Again, I want to repeat it for you. Severe abdominal pain or tenderness, persistent vomiting, mucosal bleed, liver enlargement may be there, clinical fluid accumulation, there may be lethargy, increase in HCT with rapid decrease in platelet count. So these are the warnings. If there are no warning signs, or we can call it, if it is an undifferentiated fever or dengue fever without warning signs, we can deal it as outpatient. In outpatient, we can deal it as outpatient management. But if there are warning signs with coexisting morbidities like pregnancy, infancy, diabetes mellitus, old age, renal failure, immunocompromise, sickle cell anemia, then we should admit the patient. Or when for the patient, if there is any severe plasma leakage which may present as respiratory distress of shock, there may be, if there are severe bleeding manifestations or if there is any severe organ impairment. Organ impairment we can tell by means of hypotension, his conscious levels, by raised liver enzymes, by raised serum creatinine, by decreased urine output, by pale skin. So we can tell that organ is going to multi-organ dysfunction syndrome that should be also treated in patient. So without warning signs and undifferentiated fever, outpatient management. With warning signs or without warning signs or without warning signs but with comorbid condition, inpatient management. If there is any presentations of severe plasma leakage, severe bleeding, severe organ impairment, it should be inpatient management. So outpatient management. So how to plan during the febrile phase that may last up to 7 days, and subsequent critical phase. Your clinic should look. You should look for CPCs. You should look for any dehydration signs. You should look for any warning signs, like including decreasing, or also you should look for decreased thrombocytopenia or increase in hemoglobin. So what advice you should give to the patient or the family? So for control of fever, give acetaminophen. Punching should be there. We should prevent dehydration. We should prevent spread of dengue within your house by placing the patient under wet net or filling the mosquitoes in house. Empty containers that carry water should be kept away. Screens should be covered and doors should be covered to prevent mosquitoes from coming into the house. You should explain them about the warning signs, and you should explain them that they may likely appear from 3rd to 8th day. So what warning signs you should see, and if there is any warning signs, you should advise them to come and join immediately. So what are the warning signs? I have told you earlier. So outpatient management will be you should make sure that he is well hydrated, his temperature should be under control, he should be isolated, and you should make sure that no mosquito breeding places or mosquitoes should enter into the house. Okay. So patient with warning signs. So he should be admitted in hospital. First, if you can see on your left side, you should obtain baseline CBC and also hematocrit values. You should monitor fluid intake and output and encourage. If there are no vomiting, you should encourage oral intake. If there is vomiting, you should ask for IV. You can start IV fluid. And you should also monitor vital signs every 4th hour. If the patient is taking adequate oral intake, yes, continue monitoring. You should encourage them oral intake, and you should check for signs of shock. You should continue monitoring vital signs, observe for warning signs. If he is not accepting oral intake, check the hematocrit values, give intravenous isotonic steroids like NSAID in the form of, first you should start with 5 to 7 ml per kg per hour for 1 to 2 hours, followed by 3 to 5 ml per kg per hour for 2 to 4 hours. You should check the HCT if it is normal, and if his condition is improving, you should come down to 2 to 3 ml per kg per hour for 2 to 4 hours. Recheck again HCT, and if clinical status is normal, then you can stop IV fluids and increase them oral intake again. But if the patient is not stable even after giving fluid of 5 to 7 ml, you should increase the volume by 5 to 10 ml per kg per hour for 1 to 2 hours. And again, you have to assess until the HCT comes to normal and is stable. You should taper. You should increase the fluid volume maximum up to 10 to 15 ml per kg per hour. Okay. Suppose if the child is improving, then you should gradually taper the acetone solution from 10 to 5, then from 5 to 3. While coming to compensated shock, you should be admitted directly into the ICU, obtain the baseline HCT, and also you should go for organ function tests like creatinine, AST, ALT, and serum ferritin levels. Serum, you should also ask for lactate levels. ABG you should ask for. Okay, and you should closely monitor fluid intake and output, and you should assess the hemodynamic status every 1 to 2 hours. If the patient is in compensated shock, you have to assess his clinical condition. If you should give a bolus, and you should assess the clinical condition. Patient's hemodynamic status has improved. If the patient's hemodynamic status is improved, then we can go to the left side where we can suppose if the patient comes to you with a compensated shock, you should give a bolus of 10 to 20 ml per kg per hour NSRL, and if his clinical situation improves, then you can gradually come down to 5 to 7 ml per kg per hour for 2 to hours. Again, you have to assess the hematocrit and clinical condition. If it is improving, we can again come down to 3 to 5 ml. Likewise, we can come down until he is stable and he is accepting oral. But even if one bolus also is not improving, you have to increase the bolus from 10 to 20 ml per kg per hour 1 hour. If again his clinical status has improved, again you should start again tablet. If there is no improvement, you should go for increasing the bolus, or you should go for colloids. If you can see on your left side, if the patient is improving, you can gradually decrease. If the patient has not improved, you can increase the on the middle. If you can see in the middle, you can increase the slide to 10 to 20 ml per kg. Reassess the clinical status. If the clinical status improved, again you can come down gradually. If there is no improvement, recheck the HCT and go to box C. That is, you should transfuse 5 to 10 ml per kg back to red blood cells, or again you can give 10 to 20 ml per kg or whole blood. If the patient is improving, same. Again, go back for crystalloids and start tapping. So, what are the during dengue variant? What you should not do and what you have to do? Don't use corticosteroids. But during our last year present, most cases they improve only with steroids. So don't give platelet transfusion for a low platelet count unless, which I have told you, there is hemodynamic instability or vomitings or bleeding manifestation. Never use half normal saline. Don't take, and only don't make sure that IV fluids are sufficient. You have to think of inotropes, you have to think of transfusion, you have to think of colloids also at times required. When to stop intravenous fluid? Features of intravascular compartment overload. If there are any features of intravascular compartment overload, like hypertension with good volume pulse, breathing difficulties or pulmonary edema, or then you have to stop immediately, or else if there is improvement after 48 hours also, you can stop the IV fluids. Discharge criteria. Clinically, you have to look for when there is no fewer 48 hours, you can discharge, or there is improvement in the general well-being, appetite, hemodynamic status, urine output, and there is no respiratory distress, you can discharge. While coming to laboratory, if there is increasing trend of the platelet count, stable hemoglobin without intravenous fluid, you can discharge the patient. How to prevent them? Avoid mosquito bites when traveling to tropical areas. Eliminate mosquito breeding sites in areas where dengue might occur. So avoiding mosquito bites is the only way to prevent